Fools, why sit you here? Fly to the ends of the earth. Leave your homes and the lofty heights girded by your city. The head is unstable, the trunk totters. Nothing, not the feet below, nor the hands, nor anything in between. Nothing endures. All is doomed. Fire will bring it down. Fire and bitter war, hastening an Assyrian chariot. Many are the strongholds he will destroy, not yours alone. Many the temples of the gods he will gift with raging fire, temples which even now stand streaming with sweat and quivering with fear, and down from the rooftops dark blood pours, foreseeing the straits of woe. Go, leave my temple, shroud your hearts in misery. Such was the utterance of the Oracle of Delphi. Indeed, these horrors had come to pass. Northern Greece was lost, a Spartan king was dead, and Athens burned. Yet a glimmer of hope remained for salvation, and for vengeance. Thus spoke the oracle once more. Far-seeing Zeus gives you a wall of wood. Only this will stand intact and help you and your children. You should not abide and wait the advance of the vast host of horse and foot from the mainland, but turn your back and yield. The time will come for you to confront them. Blessed Salamis, you will be the death of mother's sons, either when the seed is scattered or when it is gathered in. The foretold wall of wood was to be the Greek fleet, their site of reckoning, the Straits of Salamis. But meticulous care and planning shouldn't just be something we talk about when it comes to past military history. Self-care is also very important, but often overlooked, especially among us armchair generals. My wife is particularly disciplined on this front and has to often remind me about proper skincare so I don't end up an old wrinkled raisin. Thankfully, our sponsor Foreo offers a solution for both you and your lady. Foreo is a Swedish-based beauty tech company with a wide range of innovative devices, such as the UFO 2. It's an at-home facial device that gives you a spa facial in just 2 minutes. This is possible due to the range of tech bundled into the UFO 2, such as full-spectrum LEDs for light therapy and T-sonic pulses for pain point relief. The kit comes with a variety of masks to rejuvenate your skin, and the device itself has a paired app for dummies like me with everything from user manuals to programmable routines, advice, and more. I've definitely enjoyed how simple it makes self-care, and my wife has already started stealing my supplies, which is always a good sign of her approval. So click the link below to get the UFO 2 as a gift for yourself or your significant other. Enjoy! In September of 480 BC, Athens fell to the enemy from the east. As the great city burned, it represented a great torch around which vast armies and fleets maneuvered. To the north, the forces of Xerxes fell upon the land. His navy rounded the coasts, and a messenger set off to Susa with word of his success. As this rider traveled across the countryside, he saw before him the lands of conquered Greece, and behind him, the smoke of that country whose doom was all but sealed. And yet to the south, the Allies took this as a beacon of their resistance. Simultaneously, the pillar of smoke was seen by the Athenian citizens evacuating across the bay to Troezen, by the fleet which lay at anchor at Salamis, and by the defenders of the Isthmus of Corinth. Most importantly, it was seen by the War Council of the Hellenes, who remained locked in bitter dispute. One of its leading figures was Eurybiades, the Spartan navarch, who had been placed in charge of the Greek navy at the Congress of 481 BC. According to Herodotus, his appointment was a matter of politics, as other Greek navies apparently refused to give command to their rival Athens. And yet, at the same time, Athenian naval prowess was well recognized. And so it was that Themistocles, a prominent politician and longtime proponent of the Athenian fleet's importance, served as a leading voice in these matters. At this critical moment, these two leaders and the various Greek factions wrestled over the direction in which to steer the alliance. I shall now read from Herodotus to give you a sense of their arguments. Quote, "When they were assembled and before Eurybiades had a chance to put forth the reasons he had called the generals together, Themistocles spoke at length in accordance with the urgency of his request. While he was speaking, the Corinthian general Adeimantus, son of Octius, said, Themistocles, at the games, those who start before the signal are beaten with rods. Themistocles said in justification, "Those left behind win no crown." He then answered the Corinthian mildly and said, "It is in your hands to save Hellas. If you will obey me and remain here to fight, and not obey the words of these others, and move your ships back to the isthmus. Compare each plan after you have heard them. If you join battle at the isthmus, you will fight in the open sea, where it is least to our advantage, since our ships are heavier and fewer in number. You will also lose Salamis, and Megara, and Aegina, even if we succeed in all else. Their land army will accompany their fleet, and so you will lead them to the Peloponnese, and risk all of Hellas. But if you do what I say, you will find it useful in these ways. First, by engaging many ships with our few in the strait, we shall win a great victory if the war turns out reasonably, for it is to our advantage to fight in a strait, and to their advantage to fight in a wide area. Second, Salamis will survive, where we have carried our children and women to safety. It also has in it something you are very fond of. Remaining here, you will be fighting for the Peloponnese, just as much as at the isthmus, and you will not lead them to the Peloponnese. Men usually succeed when they have reasonable plans. If their plans are unreasonable, the gods do not wish to assent to human intentions. The Corinthian then renewed his attacks on Themistocles, telling Eurybiades not to heed the opinion or to take the vote of one who had no city. To this, Themistocles shot back that so long as Athens had its manned fleet of 200, it had both a city and a land greater than Corinth. Next, quote, he turned his arguments to Eurybiades, saying more vehemently than before, "If you remain here, you will be a noble man. If not, you will ruin Hellas. All our strength for war is in our ships. So listen to me. If you do not do this, we will immediately gather up our households and travel to Cyrrhus in Italy, which has been ours since ancient times, and the prophecies say we must found a colony there. You will remember these words when you are without such allies." When Themistocles said this, Eurybiades changed his mind. I think he did so chiefly out of fear that the Athenians might desert him if they set sail for the isthmus. If the Athenians left, the rest would be no match for the enemy, so he made the choice to remain there and fight. After the skirmish of words, since Eurybiades had so resolved, the men at Salamis would fight where they were. Over the coming days, preparations were made for battle. In typical Greek manner, this would have involved many religious rites and rituals to gain the favor of the gods. Indeed, the Herodotus account is filled with many religiously infused passages, often dealing with the signs and omens which were observed in this time. But it is also certain that many matters of logistics must have also been underway as the Greek navy made ready for a climactic fight. While Herodotus does not provide us with much insight into these activities, archaeologists have uncovered a fascinating Greek inscription which is believed to capture a decree issued by Themistocles from around this time. It reads as follows, quote, "The Athenians in their entirety and the aliens who live in Athens shall place their children and their women in Troezen to be entrusted to Theseus, the founder of the land. The elderly and movable property shall for safety be deposited at Salamis. The treasurers and the priestesses are to remain on the Acropolis and guard the possessions of the gods. The rest of the Athenians in their entirety and those aliens who have reached young manhood shall embark on the readied 200 ships, and they shall repulse the barbarian for the sake of liberty, both their own and that of other Greeks, in common with the Lacedaemonians, Corinthians, Aeginetans, and the others who wish to have a share in the danger. Appointment will also be made of triarchs, 200 in number, one for each ship, by the generals beginning tomorrow, from those who are owners of both land and home in Athens, and who have children who are legitimate. They shall not be more than 50 years old, and the lot shall determine each man's ship. The generals shall also enlist marines, 10 for each ship, from men over 20 years of age up to 30, and archers, 4 in number. They shall also, by lot, appoint the specialist officers for each ship when they appoint the captains by lot. A list shall be made also of the rowers, ship by ship by the generals, on notice boards with the Athenians to be selected from the Lexiarchic registers, and the aliens from the list of names registered with the polemark. They shall write them up, assigning them by divisions, up to 200 divisions, each of up to 100 rowers, and they shall append to each division the name of the warship, and the captain and the specialist officers, so that they may know on what warship each division shall embark. Added to this Athenian contingent would be the fleets of the other allied Greeks, including 40 ships from Corinth, 30 from Aegina, 20 from Megara, 16 from Sparta, and so on, their ranks supposedly numbering a total of 378 triremes. If fully manned, these would have been staffed by around 60,000 rowers and 2,400 marines, a truly massive force. And yet, it was dwarfed by the fleet of Xerxes, which was said to have boasted 300 ships from Phoenicia alone, in addition to 200 from Egypt, 150 from Cyprus, and on, for a grand total of 1,207 vessels. Herodotus claims that all losses from attrition since the start of the campaign had been recovered by reinforcements and from the conquered Greeks and nearby islands. These numbers are staggeringly large, and many have debated their accuracy. Unfortunately, a lack of data makes it hard to put forth a more plausible number with a much higher level of certainty than Herodotus. What is clear is that the scale of the conflict that was about to unfold was unprecedented. Thus, for several days, if not weeks following the fall of Athens, the two sides continued to make their final preparations. And yet, while battle seemed inevitable, it was still not evident where and when it would take place. In the Persian camp, we were told by Herodotus that Xerxes went down to the ships, wishing to mix with the sailors and hear their opinions. In these matters, he called forth the leaders of his fleet and sent forth Mardonius to question them. Many were quick to agree with the prevailing view that the Persians should crush the Greeks in a sea battle at Salamis. The only dissenting voice was that of Artemisia, queen of Halicarnassus and commander of the Carian contingent, who had fought with honor in the sea clashes of the campaign thus far. Here is how Herodotus puts her response. Quote, "Do not commit the fleet to battle, because at sea your men will be as inferior to the Greeks as women are to men. Why should you have to run the risk of a sea battle? Have you not captured Athens, which was the point of the campaign? Do you not control the rest of Greece? If you do not hurry to fight at sea, but keep your ships here, and stay near land, or even advance into the Peloponnese, then, my lord, you will easily accomplish what you had in mind on coming here. The Hellenes are not able to hold out against you for a long time, but you will scatter them, and they will each flee to their own cities. You see, I have found out that they do not have provisions on this island of theirs, and if you march overland towards the Peloponnese, it is unlikely that the Greeks from there will remain inactive or will want to fight at sea in defense of Athens. However, if you rush into a sea battle straight away, I am afraid that the defeat of the fleet will cause the land army to come to grief as well. Besides, my lord, you should bear this in mind too, that good men tend to have bad slaves and vice versa. Now, there is no one better than you, and you do in fact have bad slaves, who are supposed to be your allies. By this I mean the Egyptians, Cyprians, Cilicians, and Pamphylians, all of whom are useless." These words of Artemisia's to Mardonius upset her friends, who assumed that the king would punish her for trying to stop him committing himself to a sea battle, while those who envied and resented her prominence within the alliance were pleased with her reply because they thought that she would be put to death. But when everyone's opinions were reported back to Xerxes, he was delighted with Artemisia's point of view. He had rated her highly before, but now she went up even further in his estimation. Nevertheless, he gave orders that the majority view was the one to follow. He believed that his men had not fought their best off Euboea because he had not been there, and so now he prepared to watch them fight. Thus it seemed that both sides were set for a showdown at Salamis. However, Herodotus' account indicates that there may still have been some wavering among the various commanders. Therefore, he claims that the clever Athenian leader Themistocles engineered a psychological trap to force a fight which he believed would ultimately favor the Greeks. This final bit of pre-battle maneuvering is a fascinating chapter from the art of war and will be worth discussing now. The story goes that Themistocles secretly sent one of his servants on a ship over to the Persians. His instructions were to deliver the following message. Quote, "The Athenian general has sent me without the knowledge of the other Hellenes. He is on the king's side and prefers that your affairs prevail, not the Hellenes. I am to tell you that the Hellenes are terrified and plan flight, and you can now perform the finest deed of all if you do not allow them to escape. They do not all have the same intent, and they will no longer oppose you. Instead, you will see them fighting against themselves, those who are on your side against those who are not." The Persians supposedly acted on this information, immediately deploying their forces covertly that night to begin sealing in the Greeks. A blockade was established across the southern escape route to the Saronic Gulf, while a large force was landed upon the Isle of Psytalia, from which to assist their naval forces and kill any Greek survivors who washed ashore. In addition, they also now sent the Egyptian contingent around Salamis with orders to block the western and final escape route of the Allied fleet. Soon, Greek reports began to trickle in of enemy activity and of a tightening noose around their position. The commanders were at first distrustful of this news and fell once more into quarrel. But as the evidence mounted and the finality of the predicament became apparent, they now resolved to fight at sea that very morning. In the flickering shadows of the War Council, Themistocles must have grinned. Here is how Herodotus opens his description of the following day. Quote, "As dawn glimmered, they held an assembly of the fighting men, and Themistocles gave the best address among the others. His entire speech involved comparing the better and lesser elements in human nature and the human condition. He concluded his speech by advising them to choose the better of these, then gave the command to mount the ships." The action which followed is not well described, given that its participants lacked the perspective of an omniscient observer, which we would certainly prefer. Nonetheless, we shall now present a plausible reconstruction based on our sources. It seems that the Greek force deployed itself at an oblique angle, meant to nestle their army as best they could against the terrain, whilst avoiding the northern shores where Xerxes had deployed a contingent of archers. The alliance likely presented a roughly 1.5 kilometer front in a line of ships about 130 across and 2 ranks deep. The Athenians took the left, the Spartans the right, and the remainder took the center. Here they held their position, backing water to maintain the tight formation as the Persians approached. As Xerxes watched from above, he would have seen his larger fleet slowly filter into the naval battlefield. It aligned itself across from the Greeks with a slightly longer frontage and a greater depth of 3 lines. The Phoenicians took the right, the Ionian Greeks the left, and the remainder took the center. Facing off against one another in this way for likely hours, there must have been an eerie, foreboding sense of tension. What exact incident broke the spell is unclear. Herodotus mentions some lone captains summoning the courage to charge, while also claiming that a female spirit appeared to the Greek fleet, chiding the entire navy with a booming voice, "Men possessed, how long will you be backing water? To war!" What followed was a rapid escalation of action, as each move forward by a captain on one side or the other precipitated even more counteractions. This was largely by necessity of naval warfare at the time, which called for ships to defeat one another by primarily ramming their foes. Thus, as one ship maneuvered to shear the oars off a rival vessel or to pierce its sides, another ship pounced at the opportunity to do the same. Above decks, the Marines unleashed volleys against nearby crews, while below decks, the rowers heaved in near obscurity under the blind direction of their officer. Here is one particular sequence of events recorded by Herodotus. Quote, "A Samothracian ship rammed an Attic ship. The Attic ship sank, and an Aeginetan ship bore down and sank the Samothracian ship. But the Samothracians, being javelin throwers, by pelting them with missiles, knocked the fighters off the ship that had sunk theirs and boarded and seized it." This sort of scene was repeated across the entire front in what must have been an unimaginably chaotic ballet of death and destruction. Herodotus reports that to the north, the Athenians held the Phoenicians at bay, while to the south, the Corinthians are rumored to have wavered, and the Spartans suffered under the onslaught of their Ionian counterparts, many of whose captains even began to capture ships. Apparently, as Xerxes watched this action from above, he paid close attention to such deeds, calling upon his scribes to write down the names of each captain for reward. In particular, he seems to have been greatly impressed by the deeds of Artemisia, who could be identified by her distinct sails. Upon hearing unfavorable news on other fronts, he is supposed to have said, "My men have become women, and my women men." Indeed, as the battle dragged on, the action began to turn against the Persians, whose numbers could not fully be brought to bear in the narrow straits, and even served to hamper their maneuvers. Here is how Herodotus puts it. Quote, "In this struggle the general Aristobagnes died, son of Darius and the brother of Xerxes. Many other famous men of the Persians and the Medes and other allies also died, but only a few Hellenes since they knew how to swim. Those whose ships were sunk swam across to Salamis unless they were killed in action, but many of the barbarians drowned in the sea since they did not know how to swim. Most of the ships were sunk when those in the front turned to flee, since those marshaled in the rear as they tried to go forward with their ships so they too could display some feat of the king, ran afoul of their own side's ships in flight. Soon the praises by Xerxes were replaced by shouts of cowardice, treason, and beheadings. But while the anger of the King of Kings spurred his men on, it was not enough. Herodotus states, quote, "When Xerxes understood the calamity which had taken place, he feared that some of the Ionians might advise the Hellenes, if they did not think of it themselves, to sail to the Hellespont and destroy the bridges. He would be trapped in Europe, in danger of destruction. So he resolved to flight." The Greeks thus had achieved the impossible, and the oracle's prophecy was now made manifest. In our next episode, we will cover in further detail the brutal aftermath of the Battle of Salamis. For now, you can head on over to our Patreon to catch script previews, participate in polls, and get HD downloads of all our art. A big thanks to the current patrons for funding the channel, and to the researchers, writers, and artists for making this episode possible. We couldn't have done it without this team and this community. So be sure to like and subscribe for more content, and check out these other related episodes. See you in the next one.